Hurricane possible for the Florida coast this week on tonight's Tropical Weather Bulletin. And now the latest around the wide world of tropics. Tropical Weather Bulletin for November 7th. Looking around the world in terms of developed storms right now, there are none, just the remnants of Martin moving by the British Isles right now, and what's left of 4S, although it's not even marked on our screen here, but you're not missing much, it's just down in the South Indian Ocean. But this isn't the full story, there's quite a few systems that might be up and coming, particularly what we're watching in the Western Atlantic. A 90% chance of this system developing as it moves towards the Bahamas and Florida on day 160 of hurricane season, and a half chance for the other system to its northeast, so two areas of interest currently active. In the Eastern Pacific, there's nothing to watch right now on day 177 of hurricane season, and chances are diminishing of any late season activity, it would seem. Models backing off that potential hurricane that we were watching in the last few days of the medium range model runs. In the Western Pacific, there's also nothing on the radar right now, although you can never rule out late season activity here, but as of the moment, there is nothing to talk about in this basin either. And so to the Indian Ocean, where there is a 10% chance marked in the Bay of Bengal, an area of interest there that could start to move towards the west or west-northwest and could affect anywhere from Sri Lanka to Visakhapatnam in eastern India. So let's take a look at the satellite imagery right now. Looking at the Atlantic, you can see what a beast is developing here in the Western Atlantic, north of the Greater Antilles. Already caused a lot of rainfall in Puerto Rico and in the Dominican Republic, causing flooding. And now this enormous system is moving out over the open ocean and has got massive bands on its northeastern side. The Eastern Pacific looking very quiet. There isn't really anything to track here at all. There's a few thunderstorms moving in from the Central American peninsula, but mainly dry air dominating the Eastern Pacific right now with hardly anything to note. So let's take a closer look at what we've got going on in the Atlantic right now, and you can see this massive pulse with very decent cloud tops actually on the northern side of this area of interest. It is marked Invest 97L, and it will probably become a potential tropical cyclone soon. They're already considering hurricane watches and storm surge watches for the coast of Florida. Looking at this different band, which shows you the lower cloud masses a little bit better on this imagery, you can see there's not much going on in terms of a center of circulation. Up there, the northeast, you can see that other system that's being marked in sort of an arrow-shaped burst of convection there due to the wind shear profile, and that system is going to curve round to the north and then northeast, and a chance of regenerating because our team did declare that a tropical storm at one point. And the other system, which the center would end up being somewhere around there, and its track would take it maybe towards the northern Bahamas, maybe a little bit further north than that, and in towards Florida. Track is a little bit uncertain, intensity very much uncertain. The spread of the intensity guidance is anywhere from a weak tropical storm up to hurricane status. So something to watch out for. A large system, storm surge potential is also there. Western Pacific right now looks like this, and you can see there's very little going on here. The ocean is almost bare. A few little thunderstorms blowing up across the Philippines in the last 24 hours, but apart from that, really very little to speak of at all in the Western Pacific. So has it shut down for the season? I wouldn't call it off just yet. The West Pacific is notorious for its late season activity. Indian Ocean, you'll probably make out 4S, that tropical depression that weakened is now a remnant low. You can still trace it there, moving towards the west-southwest. It's not doing very much. And down in the Australian region, what's going on here? Not a huge amount either in terms of developed tropical cyclones. Western Australia getting a bit of rain there on the south coast, and it's mainly intertropical convergence activity there with thunderstorms over various parts of the Solomon Islands, Vanuatu, and on towards probably Samoa. Sea surface temperatures right now in the Eastern Pacific still remain favourable for that potential late arrival. 30 degrees possible in one or two little areas, but generally it's 28 degrees plus. Check the Atlantic then, that Western Atlantic zone, we're looking at warm waters still, 28 degrees plus. That's warmer than average, and that will help that potential system reach tropical cyclone status. If that wasn't the case, then we might have been looking at a subtropical storm that developed into a tropical cyclone later on, but it looks like it will be fully tropical. We'll see. In the Indian Ocean, still warm temperatures there. They're starting to retreat a little bit in the northern part there. In the southern Indian Ocean, still creeping up as well, generally 28 degrees in the areas that matter. And in the western Pacific, the Philippine Sea getting up to around 30 degrees still as well. Sea surface temperatures aren't a concern here, but you'll note that in the higher latitudes it's really starting to drop off. Japan, it's dropping to about 24 degrees now, if that, and along the coast of China and up to Hong Kong even, probably barely scraping 24, 25 degrees. Anomalies: Western Pacific above average, Eastern Pacific generally below with the La Nina. The Atlantic is well above in most of those tropical zones, especially where 98L is developing through. I might have said 97L earlier, it is 98L, and that is going in towards Florida. The loop current still very much there as well, and you can even see it on the OHC here, the oceanic heat content. Still, it's the Caribbean that has the best content there, but a little bit still for the Western Atlantic for that potential system. Eastern Pacific, only a little bit there, and in the Western Pacific still decent amounts as systems end up going west of Guam towards the Philippines, so still plenty of fuel there. Well, what does the GFS model say? In the short range, this is what we've got for this Atlantic system, and you can see it there developing into a very broad system. All those greens, tropical storm force winds all along the coast of the United States, the southeast coast, makes landfall as a borderline hurricane there near Jupiter, and then moves over Lake Okeechobee, I think, and then into the Gulf of Mexico. So an enormous system that would be, big storm surge potentially, widespread impacts over Lake Okeechobee, just about reaching the coast just north of Tampa Bay. Central Pacific, GFS is throwing up something here as well, and potentially a system there in that 5-day period. Well, that's what the GFS is hinting at, a tropical storm there. Could it be the fabled Hone? I doubt it. There's not much model support from the other models just yet, and that's why it hasn't been marked on our tropical weather bulletin tonight. You'll even notice another system on the GFS to the west there in the Western Pacific developing on day 5 as well. We'll take a look at that in the medium range. And in the Indian Ocean, you might be able to make out 4S continuing along to the west there, not much to make of it. And in the North Indian Ocean, that 10% system trying to get a center of circulation as it nears Sri Lanka, but it's quite difficult, and it doesn't look like it gets there at all really. So I doubt we're going to see any surprises here from these two systems from here on out, but you never know. That's why we've got a 10% tag on the North Indian Ocean. Let's check the rainfall accumulations for the southeastern US region and for the Bahamas, and you'll see that the highest rainfall estimates will still stay out to sea, but we are looking at some pockets of 5 inches for the coast of Florida, moving inland along Lake Okeechobee and towards the Tampa Bay area. 5 inches possibly, and maybe some little areas of South Carolina along the coast there that might get locally higher values as well, maybe pushing 6 or 7 inches. That's in the next 7 days. So there's still quite a bit before we get to the nitty-gritty of this, but that's a little indication there, with rain amounts up to 4 inches pretty much all the way up North Carolina along the coast. Because what will happen after the storm moves into Florida, it will then turn northwards and then northeastwards and brush along the coast and probably turn post-tropical as it does so. So quite substantial rainfall estimates there for the unprepared. In the longer range, this is the moderate range. Then what happens to that storm next? Well, there it is, sweeping right up the US East Coast. It's post-tropical by then, becomes a hurricane strength storm again as it reaches Atlantic Canada. So that will be a bit of a slammer of a storm there for Atlantic Canada as it moves through a large area of hurricane force winds as it participates with another cyclone, well, not a cyclone but a front to the north, and so that whole eastern coast area gets quite a grilling from hurricane force winds. Central Pacific into the Western Pacific, these potential 2 systems on the GFS still I wouldn't put much into this yet, but that is 2 hurricane strength storms or typhoon equivalent storms there. That one in the Western Pacific starts to move westwards again towards the end of that loop. This is day 5 through 10. That system in the Central Pacific becomes a typhoon. It's into the Western Pacific by that point, and then shoots up northeastwards and ties in with a front there. And in the Indian Ocean, what happens next? Well, let's take a look. Nothing evident just yet, and there it is near the end, a little system starting to form in the South Indian Ocean, and 2 possibly up there in the North Indian Ocean north of the equator, 1 in each sub-basin, the Bay of Bengal and the Arabian Peninsula. So that's really interesting, whether that will happen in that medium range, and both of those northern ones, certainly the one on the left hand side, reaching tropical storm status. That's all the serious stuff done. You can take a look at the Force 13 merch store whilst you're passing, scan the barcode and take a look at what we've got, including full season and individual storm animations, bespoke on request, and our still waiting for Hone t-shirt, which will never get old as long as we're still waiting. In the Scilly range then, the Atlantic has even more to offer before it reaches its end of the season potentially, and there is a hurricane in the southern part of the Caribbean Sea and a major hurricane landfall in Nicaragua. I know people in that area will be feeling very concerned just to see such a signal like that, considering what happened 2 years ago with Eta and Iota, and that would be something quite similar there but a little bit weaker on the GFS. That is long range, still a very long time to watch that and see whether it comes to fruition or whether it goes, and hopefully it will disappear off the charts. Western Pacific, there's that typhoon moving through. Very odd track for November, it has to be said, quite far north, but it does continue on in that vein, and it continues westwards, eventually towards the Philippines, starts to weaken near the end, and another system trying to form there in the Western Pacific too towards the end. So is that the Western Pacific saying it's not going to give up yet? I highly doubt that we'll see a storm like this. It's much more likely that such a system would develop from lower latitudes, but we'll see if other models climb aboard. None of them have yet. Southern Indian Ocean, that potential system forming in the wake of 4S, that's another one. So that could be a, what's that, 5th system now by this point in the season in very much the same area. It's like deja vu every day, but there it is moving southwards, hurricane force. Looking more northerly into the North Indian Ocean, these 2 systems again, well, it's just one now and then maybe another one creeping into the Bay of Bengal and becoming a tropical storm making landfall in. So a lot of signals there for the North Indian Ocean, all for quite weak storms, but it's difficult to tell which way that's going to go. A reminder that Hurricane Week is in place this month. On November 28th, we begin a week of festivities, activities, and educational documentary features. So you don't want to miss that, ending with our Force for Good charity campaign on December 4th. Well, on this day in 2015, we had Cyclone Meg in the North Indian Ocean. There it is. It was about to reach that island off the Horn of Africa, and I always forget the name of it. It's either Socotra or Socorro. I get mixed up between the one in the East Pacific and this one. I think it's Socotra, and it was a very rare storm that made landfall on that island, near that strength actually, a Category 3 at peak, right at the end of the 7th into the 8th of November, and then it moved on into the Gulf of Aden. Crazy storm. Back to today though, not so crazy circumstances, but a lot of potential. The next name on the Atlantic naming list is Nicole. In the Eastern Pacific, Seymour is next up, but will we see it at all? Who knows? And in the Central Pacific, we are still waiting for Hone. In the Westpac, next up is Yamaneko, and in the North Indian Ocean, we have Mandus. 86 storms have formed so far this year around the world. That's just 6 away from the yearly average. It looks like we're going to break through that this year. In the Australian region, next up is Darian, the Southwest Indian Ocean, Chiniso, and in the South Pacific, it's Harley. That's all for tonight's Tropical Weather Bulletin. We'll be back tomorrow night.